All right, all right. This is another week of Inclusive Talk Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Inclusive Lamar Walden, and I am here with two special guests. My co-host is not here with me today, and so I'm left all by my lonesome, but that's okay. I love her, and we're going to be praying for her. She's dealing with something right now that's important, and so we're going to be praying for Fallon Habersham and lifting her up in the spirit. But I have two wonderful podcast guest hosts with me on today, and both of them are doctors. So I got some doctors, some young black doctors on with me today. I'm going to start with Miss Elena Garcia. Can you briefly tell the people about yourself and how long you've been a doctor and how long you've been in your field?
Yeah, definitely. So, hey everyone, my name is Elena Garcia. I have officially been a doctor for about a week now. I received my doctorate last week. I attend the
Awesome.
Howard University in DC. And so it's been a long 6 years road of being in school, but I'm finally wrapping up and finishing up. So.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And we have Dr. Jameson Mercier. Is that how you pronounce the last name?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, okay. LCSW. Now, can you explain what those letters mean, sir?
So, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Jameson Mercier. The LCSW stands for Licensed Clinical Social Worker,
Come on now.
and so that's my first, I guess, bit of training, and then my doctorate is in marriage and family therapy, which is an area that I went on to specialize in. And in total, I guess I've been doing those things for close to 15 years now, believe it or not.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So, both of you, as you know, today we're going to be talking about, we've been dealing with depression for the last two sessions and identifying depression, different types of depression. This week, we're going to tackle on tonight depression in our children, in our young black children from the age of 2, 3 years old, probably even younger than that, up until 18, before they get to be real grown and on their own. Um, what made you want to work in the field of children?
Yeah, so for me, well, my doctorate's in clinical child and adolescent psychology, and so I focus primarily on working with children and teens. And just all my life, I really loved kids, but then once I got to undergrad, I actually started working with the YWCA, and they had
Mm.
a program, a mentoring program for teen moms. And through that, I just realized, how much these teenagers really needed support with all the different things that they were going through. So many of them were so strong and resilient, but they just didn't have that, like, just extra boost of support to really help them through a lot of the different things that they were going through. And so through my work as a mentor with there, I decided that I really wanted to pursue psychology and specifically pursue it with working with young people. And just, as I continue to do this and work in this field, like, one major thing that has stood out to me is just the disparity in how Black children specifically experience mental health, and also just have like a lack of access to resources as well too. It's really, really astonishing how much Black children are dealing with and how little they're receiving that help. So this is definitely an area that I'm super passionate about.
And what about you, Dr. James?
So originally, I wanted to be a psychologist when I first started. I went from not wanting to go to college to then wanting to be a psychologist. So go figure. But I got into the field of social work. And what I realized was that allowed me to capture these families and children much sooner, rather than waiting to be a doctor or PhD. And then at the end of all of these traumas and all of these hardships, I would then be seeking to help them heal. And so, the idea is you catch them upstream versus downstream. Not that one is better, because there are some situations where I do capture these families and children after. But social work was where I started, and I initially was working in child welfare. So I did that for a little bit, and God bless people who work in child welfare in that field, because I wasn't able to do it too long, because to me, that was too late to capture them. At the time that you're being removed from your home and your families are being torn apart, that creates additional trauma. Not only the reasons that kids are being removed or families are being separated, but now they have to deal with the separation. And so that's why my work kind of focuses on families' work now to help prevent some of those problems as much as possible. Equipping families with skills about what to expect from their kids so that they don't react in ways that would further endanger that family system.
How early do you think a child can experience depression?
Well, I want to defer to you,
Okay.
Dr. Garcia.
Dr. Garcia.
That's a great question. So research has shown really that children can experience it as early as 3. It's not it's not as common, and typically it's been more accepted that starting around the age 6 or so is when you can really start to see it, but there is research showing that it happens as early as 3. So, there's a lot of different ways and signs to see that this is happening, but it can start really early for kids.
Yeah, if I can just
Yes.
add to that, they can experience it early. The thing is, the official diagnoses tend to lag, and the criteria that must be evident 2 and 3, they're just not diagnosing children because they cannot grow some of these things in many cases. So we don't diagnose that early, but they do feel it.
Because for us at our age, I'm 31, and so we can tell pretty much something's happening or something hasn't happened in our life that we want to, or we get into a midlife crisis, or we get into a point in our lives where it's like, I should be here right now and I'm not doing this, and woe is me, and they're getting married, and how dare they get married before I get married, and all of those things can form depression, because we're in that moment. What do you think is the baseline for a child 6 years old to feel that type of emotion, to be in a mindset of depression?
Well, it could really be any number of things, and it really isn't all that different from the reasons we as adults experience depression. I think the biggest difference is that we have the vocabulary to be able to express what we're feeling.
Got it.
And even as adults, many times, if we're not as aware, we don't have the vocabulary. I know plenty of adults who, rather than express their emotions, would rather drink or smoke.
Lash out, fight.
Right. So children, on the other hand, are without not only the vocabulary, but then they also don't have the means to express it or lash out, because we tend to shut kids down. Physically, they can't even express those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that just tells me that there are kids out here that's having hard times paying mortgages and car payments and all type of stuff as well, just like we do. So I get it. But were you about to say something, Dr. Garcia?
Oh, I was just going to add to what he was saying about the lashing out part and how we tend to kind of shut kids down. One big thing is that kids who may be feeling this and do start to lash out or angry or are feeling upset in those ways, sometimes you look at that and may not even think like, oh, they're doing this because they're sad or they're depressed.
Right.
Start to get labeled as something completely different and can be missed. So.
Oh yeah.
I like that. That's why I've been in childcare since 2010, and I've gone to school for it, gained the knowledge that I realized that I already had by studying. And I'm a studier of the world. Pretty much, I don't need a book to tell me what I can gain from just watching and paying attention to a child. You know what I'm saying? If I wanted to learn how to cook, I don't need to go to school to do that. I could just cook and burn something down and realize, oh, I messed up. Let me try it again. And then, repetition gets me to that. So me with being around children as much as I was growing up, and having got children and having, started with babysitting and then working my way up to the YMCA as a counselor and then working my way up to substitute and working my way up to mentor and tutor, all of those parts of training and being around children, it helped me realize that these kids less need forceful of academics and more so need an understanding of the mental and the emotional. Because if you can't get them to their emotional vulnerable state, you can't ever get anything out of them otherwise. If they can't trust, are you here with me, or are you just here to just do your job and leave, get your check, and get up? They'll tell you, oh, this is just your job. You don't really truly love me, and I've experienced that. And so I realized that I had to do things differently getting older in this field mentally, and get down on their level and say, kids need a mentor in every step, even as a teacher, even as a parent. A mentor is what kids need, because if they don't have anybody to listen to them and to talk to, the world is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Can we talk about how important it is for us as adults and parents and guidance counselors and just overseers of children, how important it is to listen to them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so important, like children and teens, they need to have adults that they feel that they can trust. And a part of that trust really comes from them feeling like they're being heard and that their feelings are being validated,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's not just being brushed off as, oh, you're just hormonal because you're a teenager
Mm-hmm.
and like you'll get over this and whatever the case may be. So yeah, what you're saying, it's so important, and that's why all these different positions that our adults are in, even, coaches on sports teams and things like that, it's so important to develop relationships with teens and young kids, for sure.
Yeah, I'll just add, children don't have the capacity to validate themselves. And so they do turn to adults to give them that, to make them feel seen and heard and valued. And when we don't listen, it really does. It's essentially rejection,
Mm-hmm.
and children, for them, they carry that with them forever.
Yes.
And so it really only takes that one time to scar a child.
Yes.
And then they are scarred repeatedly by people who should be there to look out for them. So well-meaning people can scar and damage people because we're just so busy and we have a million
Correct.
things going on, but it does happen. And what I will also add is for children and everyone, right? But since we're talking about children, emotions, they are they're the foundation of our interpersonal relationships. So we base relationships on how we feel and how other people make us feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so if those are not good, and if we're not bonded, if we don't have healthy emotions, then our relationships, as we grow, they're just all out of whack.
Let me ask you this, and this may seem kooky, but it makes sense to me in a way. Have any of you had, growing up, I know I did, an imaginary friend? Don't make me seem like I'm out there by myself,
No,
y'all. Come on.
well, I'll tell you this, right? So since we're being vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
There was a time where I did try the whole imaginary friend thing, and I did it because I had friends who did it. I'll be honest. I didn't want to be left out of that like
Right, that loop.
that loop,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But what ended up happening for me is I discovered journaling. And so, and I've been journaling for many decades at this point. And my father died when I was 9. And the funny thing about my journaling is my journaling are like letters to my father. And so I recognize as a grown man that he's not around, but to this day, I still journal that way, you know?
Wow.
So that, I guess that's kind of like an imaginary friend, if in a way.
It became your substitute, pretty much.
Yeah, because I mean, there are times when I need that, and
Yes.
My mother, my father, my wife. I have friends, but
yes,
there's just imaginary friends. You imagine them to totally understand you.
That's it.
And the thing about my father, so I met him when I was 7, but then he died when I was 9. So I have an idea of what my father was like.
Right.
And as a young child, of course, I imagine him as just being just awesome, right? So I don't know any of the flaws and any of the short and misgivings of him as a person. So anything I tell him, he gets, right? My life would be better if he were here, right? And so that's how kids see it, much the same way with their imaginary friends.
What about you, Dr. Garcia?
Well, first, I just want to say thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Nice.
No sweat.
Yeah. Well, so I never had an imaginary friend, but my outlet was I used to talk to my stuffed animals when I was little.
Okay. So you had the Caillou effect.
Yes.
Okay.
Nice.
So, they couldn't talk back. They just listened to me. They knew what I meant. And then eventually that transitioned into being my dog. So,
And I asked that
version.
Yeah, exactly. I asked that question because that to me sounds like a coping mechanism of feeling lonely, feeling like you have somebody to talk to. Again, your imaginary friend is my imaginary friend was someone that was actually real, that I had lost. They moved away. And so I created that being from what I had in a friendship. And it was a really great childhood friendship that I never wanted to lose. I have separation anxiety. So from a child, I knew, oh no, these people are gonna stay with me forever. If I have to make them in a spiritual form or not, they're gonna be with me forever. And I had that person with me up until I was probably a teenager. And it was because when you feel like that saying, you can be in a room of thousands and still be alone.
Still alone, yeah.
And that's to me is a sign of depression. And so you see children and they can be playful and they can seem happy when they're around people because it's the energy that atmosphere brings off. But when they walk away or when that dies down, reality sets in for them. And you see what it really is. And so I know for a fact, like my goddaughter, I know she has an imaginary friend. And my cousin, my co-host, she asks all the time, "Who are you talking to?" I'm like, she's talking to her imaginary friend. She has built up someone, or she may be talking to Big Mom, which is our great grandma. Like, anybody that can be of a great companion will choose that any day over sorrow and loneliness. So I also want to know, what experiences have you had with a child or a group of children? Because I used to visit youth shelters a lot. That was my thing. When I stopped working in the schools and in aftercares and stuff like that, I said I wanted to do something different. And I went into youth shelters and I talked to kids that were in there for gang violence, domestic abuse, all type of, the parents didn't want them. And you see how I look. I look like one of the nerdiest church pastors. You know what I'm saying? Like they ain't gonna listen to me, but they were so into what I was bringing them because I wasn't coming to talk at them. I was coming to talk with them and to them. So what type of experiences have y'all had, or have you had that type of experience with a group of young people that you would say that you impacted their life in a way in your field?
I mean, I would like to hope and feel that in my work of working with children and teens constantly, that I'm impacting them in a positive way. Just through therapy. I do a lot of individual therapy and group therapy as well too. I would say that I can share a most recent experience that I had. So in doing my dissertation to finish up my degree, I created an intervention on sleep and stress for minority youth. And so I delivered groups that focused on how to manage stress, how to recognize the signs of stress, and then also to help improve sleep as well too. And one of the biggest takeaways from that for me was really that, a lot of times teens especially don't realize how all the different things going on in their lives are impacting them physically, mentally, and emotionally, and how that is really taking a toll on them. And so, a big thing from that was just hearing them say like, oh, I didn't realize that I was this stressed out and I can't sleep because of this, or, this is normal. This is happening to so many other people. And, just really validating that experience for them, and then also normalizing it, that letting them know, they're not alone. There's a lot of different people your age that are experiencing these same things, and there's hope to help you through this. This is not the end of the road. Like, you can get through this. So that's really been most impactful for me, and just hearing some of their takeaways from that.
Nice.
Awesome.
So I've had the opportunity to work in several agencies or capacities with children. Like I said, I was in child welfare initially. And then I worked in child welfare as like an in-home counselor. And then, my biggest problem in those areas and agencies is that they always see you when you work there as, like you were saying, or just someone who works there. It's hard for you to get beyond that. But once you're able to do that, you can create some strong bonds. But it's all based on work. So there are different limitations, time, whether it's time or what you can and can't talk about. So I've done some of that. And then I worked as a counselor for my local school district for a few years. In a high school. Now, middle and high school, they're very interesting.
Yes, they are.
That age, I really enjoyed my time when I was working with middle and high school kids, because you'll hear things that they will never tell their parents.
Right.
And, you form relationships and bonds with these children, and you can actually watch them grow and mature and do better. And the thing about the school year, before all of this COVID stuff, is that you can see a kid come in the fall and see them completely transformed by the time they leave for the summer.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to work with kids in different capacities. And I have children in my life, cousins, similar to what you were saying earlier. We try to do like different trips, camping, road trips, and just having those experiences with kids, adolescents, the exposure to just a whole different environment. That is also rewarding, not just for them, but for me as well, to be able to show them and have those kinds of experiences.
Awesome. You know, my last school that I was at was an elementary school, and I was a mentor and a tutor. And I took that job, before COVID hit. I took it very seriously because I realized that these were kids that were, for the most part, were very well behaved. I think I've never truly experienced a group of children that were, well behaved, but still had their own issues as children, you know. Um, but our job was either to mentor and tutor, which means we were getting them prepped for the FSA, which in our time was the FCAT. We was prepping them for the FSA, and that was the academic part. But I started telling my crew, who are all younger than me, by the way, so I felt like they deemed me as the leader because I was older with the more experience. And I was like, we're doing a lot of teaching and curriculum and all of that is great, but we're not mentoring them. We are using so much force and yelling, and I was the quiet one. I was the one that would sit back and watch. And whenever I did say something, they were shocked because I never spoke. And because I'm a man, and there was another guy, but he was young and he was soft-spoken, so whenever he would get there, it would be like, whoa. But when I would get there, it'd be like a hush over Jerusalem, And I took that to be a weapon of discipline, to watch the children, learn their behaviors, learn which children was acting out because of who they was with versus them being by themselves or somebody else that was well behaved versus someone that was having trouble at home.
Oh yeah.
And I remember telling my people, we would have meetings every day after work, and I would tell them, we have to get to their mental, we have to get to their emotional, we have to dig deep. Let's try a day where we start the class or end the class with a conversation, a powwow. And they would love it. It was like, oh, we're gonna do a powwow. Let's do it. And so the kids would. I said they need to know about us. They need to know that we grew up just like them, or worse off, or whatever. And because that's the only way that they're gonna connect, and not think that we're just here to dag and dig. And I said, if we just come together and tell them, and I told them my experiences, and I was like, I've been arrested. I've been put in handcuffs. You, Mr. D, really? And I was like, I've been in boot camp, because they think that, adults are perfect, or adults perceive themselves as perfect and without fault and without experiences of bad, And so children, when they hear that you've been in some form of disciplinary, you've had some trouble, they're like, oh man, you're no different than, oh wow, you had troubles with your, okay, so now I can connect with you because you're not goody two shoes and Mr. Perfect. It was so crazy that the kids, I said this on the last time, they started calling me daddy. They started looking at me as a father figure. One girl actually said, I'm really excited when I come here and I see you because you're so funny. You remind me of my dad, and I never really get to see him. So whenever I see you, I'm just so happy.
Wow.
Oh, she just became my favorite. You should never have favorites, but she was my favorite. And then I had my twins, and the boys. My twins were, I was the only one that could handle them because they were literally, if one was sad, the other one would get sad, and if one was happy, the other one would get happy. It was like synced, but I was the only one that could handle them. And so when my crew realized, it was like, Mr. D. Like I would talk to, I would get them to talk to them instead of saying, y'all just no, talk to them, bring them out from the rest of the kids, because if you do it in front of the kids, that's embarrassment. Of course they're gonna lash out.
course. Of
Now, I'm
course.
not, but I'm not saying that I didn't have my moments of rage when I just got fed up, but those are necessary, especially when they don't see that happening so often.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And these children nowadays, they're so different than when we were coming up.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
well,
speak on it.
well, don't be too quick to agree with me because you're not sure what I'm going to say, you know?
Okay.
Um, I've had similar experiences, and this is with uh, high schoolers.
Oh
I've had
Lord.
I've had high schoolers call me dad,
Hmm.
and I've had to sit back and say, "Whoa, this sounds like some HIPAA violation here."
Right. Let's wait
But
a minute.
let's clarify. And I couldn't get them to stop. And the reason is for exactly what you're saying.
Hmm.
To have someone who will set aside, whether it's an hour, half hour, 45 minutes, just to focus on them, they don't get that anywhere else but in my office. Yes, it's part of my job. They understand that, we know that, but even knowing that, it doesn't change how it makes them feel, you know? And this is why therapy is so important for even adults,
Yes.
because at work or with your spouse or with your kids, no one pays attention to you. And
Yes.
so, but if you have a good clinician, you're all they're focusing on for that 55 minutes, hour, whatever it is. And so I definitely understand what you're saying with that. Now, to your point about kids as being so different these days, I don't know that they are.
Okay.
Okay. I think what's different these days are some of the challenges that they're facing, number
Hmm.
one. And number two, the difference is the way in which adults are responding to kids.
Okay. I'll take that.
So I know how the adults in my life responded to me, and they weren't all
Hmm.
perfect, no.
Hmm.
But in terms of paying attention to me and not being too
Hmm.
busy for me and being more involved in my life and the things that would benefit me, I had a lot of that, even despite losing my dad so young. Today, though, there's so much that our kids are facing and so early, and it just seems they don't even have a chance to recover. And then parents, and I'm talking to my generation now, right? So these kids' parents themselves, they have their own set of challenges that they may or may not be equipped for or equipped to handle. And then that leads to them responding to the kids in a way that does not benefit the situation.
Hmm.
Um, so we're kind of like spiraling at that point, you know? So naturally, you're going to have what we call a different or difficult kid, but every generation seems to think that the generation after them is worse
Was
off.
so
We
much
all
worse.
do that,
That's true.
you know?
Yes.
And I want to defend the generation after me because in some ways they're way better than I was. They speak up more, they challenge, and
Oh
they're not
yeah.
afraid of nothing. So
Hmm.
we just kind of have to parent them differently or in the way that they need is what I want to throw into this
I like
conversation.
it. I like it. I like it. We have to add Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I do think that we tend to say, oh, like kids these days,
Right.
they're just like terrible. I'm like, well, you
Back
know,
in my day.
That's what our
right,
parents. That's what our parents said about us, right? That's what they said about
right.
us.
Yeah, they did, but I mean, if you
Yeah.
really look at it and each generation, everyone was doing something in some way
That's
that
true.
the generation before did not like,
Oh
and
yeah.
Oh
um
yeah.
yeah, and just what you're saying about it's just the challenges differ, right? As society advances, as different things come up, now there's so much with social media and like influences
Yes.
from that. And when we were younger, social media wasn't really that big of a thing, if a thing at all. And
Not for
and
me at
so
all.
yeah,
Oh,
so it's just yeah, the challenges, like you're saying, things are just different with each generation, and then so parents have to adjust accordingly to handle what they're dealing with, which they may not always know how to do. One,
right.
because they have their own things that they're dealing with, and two, because they may not have experienced those exact challenges when they were younger, and so Dr. Mercer, what you were saying earlier about, working with families to try to help address these different things that they're experiencing. So then that way they can respond to their kids in a better way. Kids and teens, they can't heal without their parents and their families. Like they need support in order to be able to get to the place where they need to be. And so it is so important to include their immediate support system that they do have to help them recognize, like, okay, yes, your kid right now, they're doing this, this, and this, and it's driving you crazy, but you can address it in this way to help things be a little bit better. So
100%.
Oh, I'm loving this conversation. So what, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. There's a responsibility of somebody, whether it's the parents, the teachers. How can we do better at identifying when our children, when depression creeps in our children? How can we do better? Is it paying attention to them more? Is it not shutting it off when we see the behaviors change and we think they're just lashing out, or how do we do better with identifying depression in our kids?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is to pay attention to patterns and really, paying attention to your kids and trying to take notice of when something seems off or different. And it can be things as simple as their appetite is changing. It could be increasing or decreasing. Their sleep could be off, and not brushing some of these things to the side. If you see that your kid is more irritable, because irritability is a huge sign of depression for kids, more so in kids than adults. And so, just really paying attention to these patterns and noticing, and then giving your child an opportunity to try to talk to you and express it to you. So you notice these things happening, and then take a moment to sit with them and ask, has anything new happened recently that may be bothering you? Or even saying, I noticed lately that you've seen a little bit more angry lately. Is something going on? And just trying to help them to talk to you. But then at the same time, like we were saying earlier, not all kids have the vocabulary to be able to express that. And so a big thing is that if as a parent or teacher, you do start to notice some of these changes, just seeking professional help in that area, I think is so important. And, the earlier, the better, because when we can catch these things earlier, the kids tend to have a better prognosis for their recovery. So.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I'll add to your question, about responsibility. I really do believe it's all our responsibility, not just teacher or the parents.
I want to hear.
We all deal with children on some level, whether they're our neighbors or, you drive a bus and you take kids to school, right? Here, when I was teaching in the district here in Florida, Mental Health First Aid, which I think is a nationwide initiative, but they were teaching everyone here in Florida, because the kids, it could be the security guard, it could be a teacher, it could be even the substitute. You need to know you're responsible, because in that moment, you're all that kid has. Okay. Yeah. As far as doing better, I think some basic knowledge of childhood development will go a very, very long way. Because there's typical childhood and adolescent behavior, and then there's troubled behavior. Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to differentiate between the two. As kids grow and change, their behaviors will also follow. And we often mistake typical behavior for troubled behavior, And so parents will lash out when they ought to show some compassion and understanding, or they may ignore something when they ought to inquire more. And that is, if we can turn those things around and just say, hey, you know, your kids between 7 or 8, or they're going to first grade, you can expect these things, you know, or your kids 12, maybe going to be 13, 14, expect these things. Yeah, they're going to want more privacy. Doesn't mean they're
Yeah.
doing anything wrong.
When those hormones kick in. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
And they may not want to hang with you, but that doesn't
Yeah.
make them a bad kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so if we can begin to just understand those things, and I like what you said about paying attention and noticing, but a lot of people notice things and they just don't know what they're looking at.
Mm.
You know what I mean? If your kid is sleeping a lot more than before, you're like, wait a minute, should I be concerned? Should I feed them? What do I do? And so just some basic understanding of the way children grow and change as they develop really, really goes a long way.
I think adults that work in the childcare system, in the childcare field, and parents, I truly believe, as I see more and more cases of neglect or parents getting weary because they can't figure out what to do and how to, handle a human being's emotions. I really think that there's a course that should be taken. Because it's not easy, but it just doesn't have to be that difficult either. Like it's about how would you care for yourself?
Well, listen, there are lots of courses. They're out there, but guess what? The parents find out about these courses after they've been hit with a child abuse charge or a child neglect charge. And this is what I was saying before. At that point, it's too effing late. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if we could have given them this to say, listen, your 6-month-old is gonna cry. When an infant is teething, they're in pain. You don't talk to a teething infant like you would a 10-year-old.
5-year-old, yes.
And so, but it's too late when they're in front of a judge and they're mandated to take these courses.
Okay. So put a meter right there. We're gonna take a quick, short break, and we're gonna come back. Okay, real quick. We're gonna come back.
Okay.
And we are back. Now. Dr. Jameson, you were talking about something that I have been talking about for years, and that is yes, and that is growing with your child. The level of where your child is, that's where you need to be. And even if you have to go back to understanding an infant and a toddler and a child and an adolescent and a teenager and, you know what I'm saying, or preteen, the teenagers and, someone that's in their 20s, you have to grow in every level. You have to grow. You said that if a 6-month-old is crying, you're not going to say, what's wrong? Like they can answer you.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. You're not going to say, well, just what do you want? Your bottle? What you want? What you want? It's really about, okay, have I fed her? Check. Have I changed? Check.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he just woke up. Okay, so maybe he's tired just a little bit because he probably didn't have enough time to sleep, but maybe he just want to be cradled. Maybe they just want attention, or maybe they just want to cry.
Maybe it's cold. Maybe it's too hot. There's a whole slew of things it could be.
See, I was never the type of person that if a child or a baby started to cry, oh, let me go see what's wrong. I learned that sometimes babies cry because they just want to. It's just like us singing or talking just because we want to. It's their way of expressing. It's what babies do. They cry.
Mm-hmm.
Just like birds chirp and bears growl or lions growl, bears or dogs bark, cows moo. Like that's what they do. You don't ask them, well, what do you want? Do you want some grass, some milk? You want some berries? It's just what they do. And so you meet them in their element. when you realize that, okay, if I've done all the necessary things that can be done for this child, and maybe they just want to cry, and my mental, I can't stand, oh, I just can't hear a baby's cry, so maybe I just need to remove myself.
Yeah, well, assuming you've gone down your checklist and made
Right.
sure that they're okay, yeah, you may want to just wait and see for sure. There's also the whole self-soothing thing.
Hmm.
Um, there's a whole lot of things. But yeah, a lot of parents don't have that, um, whether you call it maturity,
and
education,
and patience.
patience, and they've not learned it. Maybe they weren't taught it. I don't know. You know what I mean? Um, an interesting point I'll add, when you talk about growing with your child, that makes sense if you have one. But
That's okay. That's
if
true.
you have if you have four, right? So one's 15 and now you have an 8-year-old.
Oh
Now your
boy,
mind's got to be in multiple places and
that's yeah.
spaces. And then if you have a 6-month-old, now you are like, okay, I would not talk to the 15-year-old like I would talk to the 8-year-old, and I would not talk to the 6-month-old like the 8-year-old. And so that's where parents can easily feel
Got it.
overwhelmed
Got it.
because there's so much to manage. And at a point like that, you just say, hey, there's support. You don't have to do it all by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
So for
Mm-hmm.
single
Mm-hmm.
parents, surrounding them with support, um, and just, it, the least amount of support will go a long way in situations like that, you know?
Mm.
So,
Wow. Okay, so let's get down to this movie. Um, that I'm glad both of you have seen and watched. And this movie is just the greatest example of a child's handling of emotions. And the movie I'm talking about is Inside Out, the Pixar movie Inside Out, which I'm not going to be shamed in saying that I'm just now watching at the age of 31. Maybe a couple of weeks ago. Who's counting? But I was watching a podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, Kev on Stage, one of his various podcasts, and it was Righteous and Ratchet, and he was talking about this movie, and the way that he explained it, I was like, whoa, what is this? Because I love things being explained to where it hits me. I'm an intellectual. And he explained this cartoon as if it was theater, and I'm a theater major. So
mm,
I was like, yo, you mean to tell me that there were like emotions in this little girl's body that were forms of people that was handling all. I was like, oh my God, what if there are people inside of my head that are like doing things and whatever? So, okay. So saw the movie. So this little girl, Riley, which is one of my goddaughter's names, Riley. This little girl, Riley, she was born. She was born happy. She was born with joy, right? So you have all of the five emotions. You have joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. I'm serious, y'all. I have my notes. I wrote notes on my. I'm talking about writing notes. So she had joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. She experienced joy first, and then not too far from experiencing joy, she started to cry, and joy looked over, and sadness appeared, and sadness was instantly connected to joy in my mind. And then as the child grew in her days, then you saw anger. As she grew older in her years, then you saw disgust and fear starting to gather in her mind. And she has these islands. They're called the islands of personality, which I think all of us pretty much have these similar islands: the goofball island, and family island, and friendship island, honesty island, and her hobby island, which was hockey island. Mine would be music and theater island. um, y'all would probably be Dr. Island or something like that, whatever your hobbies are. And then they had these memory balls. Now you had the long-term memories, you had the short-term memories, and then you had the memories that were literally thrown down in a pit of forgetfulness. They were turned into dusts eventually. And so I realized that joy was the core leader, but sadness was attached to joy. And I was like, I never understand that. How can sadness be attached to joy? And then I kept writing. I said, joy was effective, but once sadness creeped in, it altered the little girl's memory. Sadness would always be so close to where joy was, or would sneakingly try to touch the ball. And as soon as she tried to touch the ball, it would change the little girl's memory from joy to a sad memory. And so all of the emotions seem to rely on joy to keep things positive. All of the emotions knew that joy could keep this little girl where she needed to be. So they relied on her. But of course, sadness stayed messing things up. She was just always in the way. And that could really be what happens. We got that job interview, and it seemed like, the job interview was great. But they didn't call us back when they said that they was going to call us back. And now it just went from joy to sadness so quickly. And so joy and sadness got sucked up into the little thing, and it was thrown out of the girl's mind. So all that she had left, get this, if you remember easily, all that she had left was what? Anger, disgust, and fear. What kind of combination is that? Who would want to be left with those three emotions only? Because when I thought about it, who out of anger, disgust, and fear, who became the strongest emotion? See if y'all remember, y'all paying attention. Who became the strongest emotion?
I think was it fear? It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, same. I was gonna guess anger.
Anger. Anger became the strongest emotion because fear was fearful of doing things wrong and messing up, and disgust just didn't care. She was just like, whatever. I don't want to touch, who cares? Fear was like, get out of my way. I got this. You want to do this to me? I don't know if y'all remember Denzel Washington.
Anger was like that.
Anger was like that. I don't know if y'all remember Denzel Washington in Training Day. You gonna do this to me? That's what anger did. And so without joy or sadness to balance them out, anger took over.
Yeah.
And the first personality that she lost was Goofball Island. She lost her sense of goofiness with her dad. And a lot of times that would be the first thing that a child loses is a sense of child play. And that is so significant because if you as a father or mother cannot get your son or your daughter to laugh, where you know that is like the greatest feeling of all, to be able to tickle or do a little faces or whatever, and they just get the little goofiness, that can be really, really traumatizing. And so the second item that she lost was friendship. How did she lose friendship? She was talking to her friend from back when she was in her old neighborhood before she moved, and she realized that her friend had a new friend. So she got jealous. And because joy and sadness wasn't there, anger took over and was like, oh, really? And she became angry. And she denounced her friend. Nothing is fun or worth doing when you're sad. I wrote that because when they showed joy and sadness, joy was trying so hard to get them back into the little girl's mind. Sadness, with everything that she did, she wasn't having fun. Nothing was worth doing because she was sad and depressed. Without joy, anger takes over even more. So the third island she lost was Hockey Island, which was her true love. She loved mostly playing hockey with her family. So she lost that. Without joy to control the emotions, everything is either controlled by anger or sadness. But sadness is very important. And this is what got me, y'all. Anger causes her to run away back to what made her quote unquote happy, which was her old life, her old state where she lived. She ran away. So the next island she lost was honesty because she stole out of her mother's pocketbook and stole some money or her credit card. So she lost all joy and she lost her sense of imagination, which was the little Bing Bong character that she had, which was her imaginary friend. We talked about that earlier in the segment. The imaginary friend was significant for Joy because as Joy was trying to get back to where she belonged, the imaginary friend realized that it couldn't go with Joy. It had to die because the little girl needed Joy more than she ever needed an imaginary friend. Mm. So it had to sacrifice itself. Joy could also feel sadness. It hit me so hard. I was reading the comments on YouTube and somebody was like, oh yeah, because her hair was blue. And I was like, her hair is blue, her eyes is... So there's some type of connection with joy and sadness. It were always the ones that was just the core. And sadness became the hero at the end of the movie. Because you realized that in order for this girl, when she came back home, in order for this little girl to appreciate what was good in her life, she had to release all of her emotions. She had to release that sad feeling that she felt of how she made her parents feel, of how she was feeling. And when she released that emotion, she was able to feel joy again. Because when you're filled with so much sadness and you're so bottled up and you say, I'm strong, I ain't gonna cry, I'm strong, I can deal with it. All we're doing is suppressing what we're feeling. And the more she suppressed her feelings, the more depressed she got. And so in order to express herself, she had to let go of all her sadness. So Joy gave sadness all of the core memories. So it was like, I want you to have all of these memories. Make them all sad. So she went down memory lane. And everything that she saw was sad. But it wasn't that it was sad, it's that she was remembering all of the good times that she had. And so the thought of everything she lost allowed her to be honest with her feelings. And then and because one truly can appreciate true joy until they've experienced true sadness.
She was grieving.
It's grieving. And that's something that I truly want to do a podcast with your wife because she's experienced in grief.
Right.
And that's something that I want to really talk about as well. But it's grieving. And so she took sadness, what was so significant about her, she realized she can't stay here. She can't stay in this sad state. So she took Joy's hand. Ooh, that's how you coincide with feelings. And she took Joy's hand and she put it on the little button. And the girl started smiling because she was grateful to be back home, to have her family. And she realized that all of the memories that she ever had was worth it. She didn't care about where she was living or who her friends were. She was happy to be back where she belonged with her family. Mm-hmm. And it's so significant as we're talking about children and depression. There's different levels to this. And I want y'all to end it out with something that you want to share to the audience, because this is going to be made for that children are able to watch on YouTube. And talk to the audience as children, as parents, as educators, what we should know, especially now with everything going on with Black Lives Matter movement, with everything going on in our schools, with what we've experienced of Literally, we've been homeschooling since March.
Mhm.
A mindset of craziness that could have started from that. Kids been out of school for 4, 5, 6 months. You know, the greatest thing about that to me is there's no bullying.
Well,
Yeah,
Really, really.
cyberbullying.
cyberbullying. Yeah.
But are they on the computer with other students, or are they by themselves?
Well, cyberbullying is much broader than that, right? I can
Right.
get
It
your
could be social
number.
media.
I can text you
Oh,
directly.
Mhm.
see, I thought that would have been easier for them if they was homeschooled. They was homeschooled.
No, these kids are forever connected.
Wow. So okay, so talk to the people for me. Either one of y'all can go, and let's encourage some students. Let's encourage some children that depression is something that it can be maintained. Correct? It can be maintained. It's just like any other emotion that we have can be maintained. There's nothing that makes us bad or awkward or weird. It's something that we all feel as humans, right?
Well, I think the word you mean is manage.
Man, it can be managed. That's what.
Yeah.
That's what. Yes,
Okay.
yes, it can be
And
managed.
and so absolutely we can manage um, depression and pretty much any emotions for that matter. If I can just back up for a quick second. So in the movie, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when the dad found out about his job, it was pretty sudden.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, and it seemed like they tried maybe half-heartedly to like talk to her about it, tell her about it, but it was still very sudden. So
Yes.
that was a traumatic event for her.
Mm-hmm.
And what you don't see in the movie, or I don't recall happening in the movie, is sitting with her and preparing her for it, or just kind of going at her level and understanding this experience from her side.
They were
Okay.
dealing with their own as
There was
adults.
so much
Yes,
going on, and
yes.
this goes back to what we said earlier in this chat. And so if there's anything I could leave with the people listening and watching, is that we have to talk to our kids. We have to, and it's hard to include children in the decisions and affairs of adults. But believe me, you have to include them. They don't need to know what your bills look like. They don't need to know when you get your raises and bonuses or all of
Yes.
that. But if you're moving cross country, I mean, I don't want to find out I'm moving cross country the day of or the day before, And so I know that professionally, but personally. So when I came from Haiti, I found out I was coming to Florida the day I left Haiti. So I went to school, and when I came home, there was a suitcase by the door.
Mm.
And so a couple hours later, I was in Miami, and my life totally changed. And so, but that happens all the time.
Yes.
Okay. And nobody prepared me for it. And I understand as an adult why it went the way it did, given conditions in Haiti at the time. But if at all possible, we have to communicate with children about these changes and transitions in their lives, okay? When we're uprooting them, whether it's changing schools, um, churches, or, we're gonna go vegan, I don't know. Whatever it is, you have to prepare them for it, because it can be traumatic.
I like that. I like it. Dr. Garcia.
Yeah. So, for any of the children and teens that may end up watching this, I mean, really, my take home message that I want to just leave you with is that you are important. Your voice matters. You are cared for, you are loved. And, we want to hear and know what's going on for you and help you and support you in any way that you may need it. And that help and support is always available. And so, really, just try to identify at least one adult in your life that you can trust and use that help. when you need it, because like I said, you matter.
Mm. And to add on to that, it's also important, especially in the family and as teachers, to compliment our children, to tell them when they're doing great, to have family meetings, have powwows, and ask them questions. How do you feel about me as a father today, this week, this month, this year? How did I do? And allow them to be open and honest, and and have those sacred meetings, and just as a family, as a teacher and a student, because again, like you said, Dr. Jameson, they need to know that they have a voice. They need to be heard. They need to know, like you said, Dr. Garcia, they need to know that they matter. They matter. And so thank you both. I think this was a very informative session on tonight, and we could talk for probably another hour about the levels as they get older into their teens and become grown folk with bills. You have to deal with, still childhood traumas. You know what I'm saying? It can really, really go deep. So thank you. And you're welcome on Inclusive Talk anytime. We don't even have to talk about depression or nothing like that. You can just come on and just talk about sports or whatever you want, you know what I'm saying, or whatever your interests are. And again, congratulations to you, ma'am, for getting your doctorate. If you don't mind, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I just turned 28.
Oh,
nice.
Wonderful. And many more accomplishments to go in your life. And the same thing for you, my brother. I'm pretty sure that you're not done where you are. You're not content right now. You're going further. I can see it. And so I speak prosperity into both of you guys live. And to whom is watching, we speak prosperity in your life. And depression does not have dominion in your life. Amen. Can we agree to that?
Oh, for sure, man.
Okay, so this has been another installment of Inclusive Talk Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Inclusive Lamar Walden, and I say be inclusive. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.